Top of the day to everybody, I am your host, Mr. Sean, and welcome back to another episode of Chimera Miniatures' official YouTube channel. I'm currently sick at home with a stomach bug, so looks like we are getting a third episode this week. Please make sure while all of you are out there doing whatever you can to live, thrive, and survive that you are drinking plenty of water and taking care of yourself and washing your hands. Today we're back with more RPG horror stories, but before that, the ad. Since this channel is not monetized and I have no Patreon, I use these videos as a way to boost my own business, Chimera Miniatures. The best place to go for custom tabletop miniatures, HeroClix miniatures, and not safe for work miniatures. Be sure to check out my eBay page, links are in the description, or contact me via any of my social medias and I can make something special for you. And without further ado, let's get into today's RPG horror stories. Our first story today comes from user Kangbat and is entitled, Gee, this Goliath sounds familiar.
Want to get this off my chest and using a throwaway account. A year ago, played in a homebrew campaign where we had a player leave for personal reasons. DM recruited a new player who would be joining us as a fighter, and the guy seemed alright. That was until he began RPing his PC. Now as a disclaimer, I like Critical Role Campaign 1. Campaign 2 and 3 are just alright. Back to the horror story. New Guy's PC speech pattern and voice imitated a very familiar Goliath, and even had a similar name as Grog, minus the first letter G and add SHR to it instead, so Shrog. He even made his PC a Goliath, reskinned as a well-known, snow-cone-loving cryptid that lives in the Himalayas.
Snow cone?
No, don't worry. It's lemon.
When we asked why the similarities, he got defensive and said Grog sucked. His PC was better in many ways, and he was a better voice actor. Right. Red flag collected, and at our expense. Imitation Grog's backstory quest led the party to another world, and in this quest, Paladin died and had to roll up a new PC, Fighter Rogue Multiclass. As a fighter subclassed Battlemaster, Imitation Grog didn't even know how to use his features and never applied them for the bonus damage. Yet he complained when our rogues did more damage than Imitation Grog. Then he wanted to be able to cast spells like the Wizard and Cleric. Now our DM is a very generous person. He allows us to add a homebrew item to our character, but encounters will be adjusted accordingly. Imitation Grog had DM add a ring to an encounter and was his personal homebrew item. It was a combination of Ring of Spell Storing plus 17th level Arcane Trickster's Spell Thief feature, except no limit to spell level, and used his con modifier as spell casting stat. Imitation Grog wanted a Mary Sue PC to outclass every class in the party, basically. In the DM's defense, he threw a homebrew CR 20 plus creature at us while we were only level 6 at the time. He just didn't realize the craftiness of the party to overcoming this crisis and finding this item for Imitation Grog, i.e. successful counterspells, flanked and cornered, unlucky save rolls forcing legendary resistances to go off, sneak attack stacking with 2 multi-classed rogues, Mage Slayer versus melee range spellcasting. Imitation Grog, again, never learned to apply his Battlemaster features for bonus damage and combat control. Luck was, however, on our side, and the creature went down in 5 rounds. Imitation Grog claimed the item and went on a power trip. Or tried to. He didn't even know how his ring worked correctly and would change its magic properties on a whim, to which we all called his BS. He was booted from the party since everyone was done with his shit. It was bittersweet since Imitation Grog's personal quest caused a PC death and was a minor footnote to our campaign. Edit. For clarity, this posting should have been a long posting of very in-depth dive on this character, but I didn't want to turn it into a rant, hence the shortness of it. That being said, this player was in his 40s and claimed to be very knowledgeable about D&D. If we tried to help him, he felt offended and used passive-aggressive language mixed in with jokes, lols, and just kidding. He also gave a hard no when we suggested he change his subclass to Eldritch Knight if he wanted to access magic. Said something along the lines of, subclass shouldn't characterize how PCs acted in D&D. And if he wanted his Battlemaster to be capable of casting spells, he should, cause it's his character. Couldn't even multiclass into Wizard cause his intelligence wasn't at the 13 minimum. Even if it was, don't think he would have done so cause he wanted to remain a pure fighter class. It boggled the mind of any sane individual at the table. He was also very competitive in the fact that he once got upset the Paladin at level 5 can make extra attacks like the Fighter. It was a one-sided competition to deal out the most damage, yet Paladin and Rogue didn't even care for it. As for the death of the Paladin, on his PC's personal quest, we encountered a deity-level entity that was meant to capture and torment the party. The Paladin sacrificed his life so he could run away, and after completing Imitation Grog's quest, there was no words of thanks.
Alright, lot to unpack here. I keep getting stuck on the name Imitation Grog. For those of you who don't know, the actual drink grog is more or less just an alcoholic lemon shake, so I'm trying to think of how I would make Imitation Grog for Christmas this year instead of normal grog like I make. I don't know, do they make fake lemon? Maybe I could just use some Splenda instead of a cup of sugar. But anyway, I'm a fan of Critical Role myself. I actually learned how to Dungeon Master while watching that show and building my own campaign because I had no idea how to play D&D when my friends voluntold me that I was going to run D&D because they wanted to try it. It has since become my obsession, but I digress. I find it funny that this guy wanted to play Grog even though he's playing a fighter. Grog is a barbarian. He's like, I have to be a battle master, even though Grog is a great weapons master. He claims to be super knowledgeable about D&D, but insists that subclasses shouldn't affect how you play your character. Refuses to switch to a subclass that is more akin to what he wants to do, even though he refuses to figure out how to use Battle Master. And that one's hard. I've looked into that one. I've looked at making one. That one sounds hard to use well, but it sounds pretty cool. But yeah, it's complicated. And if you're looking for a simple fighter build, probably not the way you want to go. And yes, I love Critical Role. I never thought of Bard would ever be like a usable good class until I saw Sam Riegel play Scanlan Shorthold. And yes, I have played a Bard since then, but I don't make my Bard Scanlan, nor do I make him Dandelion from The Witcher, even though I love that character too. This just sounds like a Critical Role fanboy who really didn't understand how to play D&D. Our next story comes from Phantom Dude YT and is entitled, British Guy Calls Me a Nazi for Improving a Satirical Nazi on the Side of the Street. I made a D&D campaign involving a food truck in a modern day city, which gets sent through food-based dimensions. Basically as wholesome as it gets. The players go off the intended map I made where they would sell their food for that day. I have to quickly improv some comedic people, since I get people to sign up saying the genre of the campaign is comedy RP. The players run into a guy who lies on the floor and recites Hitler quotes. Party ends up poisoning him, and soon after, session ends. Next week, after I've spent hours drawing up battle maps the whole week, 30 minutes before the session, I get this message, which makes me basically somehow laugh and cry inside at the same time.
Unfortunately, me and name of someone else are going to have to pull out, to be completely honest with you. It's this whole Nazi Germany thing and the power of this disagree on you. No, we are British, and as you know, was the main country against the Nazis in the first place. After playing the game last week with all you, I have come to the conclusion you're all some weird right-wing Nazi-loving state from America. I do apologise in pulling out of your game that I know that it's taking you a while to pull together. Maybe if it is about something different, then yeah, I could probably carry on playing the game with my partner, but because of the nature of your game, I'm sorry, I'm pulling out, and says my partner thank you and goodbye.
Funniest part is, I have said multiple times throughout the campaign that I was Asian, living in Asia. Okay, holy run-on sentences, Batman. That message was hard to read, but let's break this down a bit. Bringing Nazism of any kind to your table is that's a bold move, and not everybody is going to be okay with that. First of all, I get that you were in a tight pinch because they went off map, but why did your mind immediately go to Hitler quotes? And I don't know. You described this as a satirical Nazi, but this was just some guy quoting Hitler. I'm not entirely sure what the satire was meant to be. Doesn't matter if you're Asian, that's just Hitler's a weird way to go with D&D. Not surprised this British guy missed that you were Asian though, because apparently he barely grasps his own language, so it's easy for, I'm not even sure he knows entirely how to read properly. It sounds like he was just talking in a speech-to-text program with all those run-on sentences, but I don't know, man. I mean, yeah, I can kind of see where he's coming from. I can see why it makes you kind of like, what the hell just happened? But this one's kind of a crapshoot all around. Also, how do you just know Hitler quotes off the top of your head? I mean, I grew up, my father's a World War II historian, and I don't know any Hitler quotes off the top of my head, though I know a ton about World War II. Though, to be fair, I have forgotten most of it. I never knew direct Hitler quotes to begin with. Our next tale of RPG horror comes from 13th Syndicate and is entitled, Please Just Get Back on the Railroad. So I'm in a game of Vampire the Masquerade. I'm going to be vague since the GM in question watches this subreddit. But this GM is a new GM for our group and isn't used to our way of playing the game. Their other group is a horror story in and of itself. I really like the GM as a person, but things have been very up and down so far. Their GMing is getting a lot better, and we're all excited to see them grow. However, sometimes they backslide. This is one such occasion. We're coming near the end of a long plot arc and are involved in one final mission, delivered to our coterie by the primogen of their clan. Our objective is being transported via a heavily guarded ship, and we've made a plan to wait for it to be delivered and snatch it at the destination. We end the session in high spirits. Over the week between sessions, our GM messages a player, our Ventru, and asks them to do a one-on-one session with them. During this session, an NPC we have met literally once before delivers vague and cryptic warnings that basically boil down to,
"Don't do the quest the way you're doing, or else unspecified very bad things will happen and everyone will die. Have you thought about assaulting the ship? Also, here is a list of acceptable NPCs to give the quest objective to."
Notably, the NPC we were planning on giving the objective to was not on said list, and we were told that if we did give it to that NPC, other unspecified bad things will happen. The player who received this cryptic warning is, needless to say, more than a bit upset about being told to get back on the railroad like a good little girl. Worried that they were overreacting, they shared with the rest of the group, and we all confirmed we had the same impression. Needless to say, this warning didn't totally work, though we did give the GM a break and decided against letting everything blow up in our momentary frustration.
Well, I hate to say it, but OP, I think you and the DM are both horror stories here. I mean, sure, the villain of this story is the Dungeon Master, or Game Master, sorry, this is Vampire, not D&D. But the fact is, yes, nobody likes to be railroaded. Everybody should be anticipating their group to go off the rails, so to speak. The first time I ever played a tabletop RPG was playing, I believe it was 2nd edition of Vampire the Masquerade. We were looking for a high-ranking vampire who had been kidnapped. There was a list of places we could investigate, and we decided to split the party to investigate quicker, and it just so happened that the one location where all of the plot was supposed to take place was the bar that our anarchist Brujah player went to and ended up burning the place down, and the GM really wasn't able to deal with that derailing, and it just kind of made the rest of the campaign really tedious. So yeah, definitely the GM, should not be railroading you guys. It sounds like you took the time to make a plan, execute the plan, wait for the plans to go off the rails, throw away the plan. And if your GM can't adapt to you coming up with a plan different than the way they wanted you to do it, also, if you weren't supposed to give this objective to the person who hired you to get the objective, they needed to make that clear through storytelling, not having someone tell you, "Don't do it, give it to these people instead, or else." So yeah, GM is not a great GM. You, however, sound insufferable, talking about how the GM isn't great with our group from the way we play games, and about how their other group is a horror story in and of itself. You sound throughout this like you're very much patting yourself on the back. You sound very judgmental of people. I bet you're one of those guys when you play. I bet you're kind of insufferable. Or that could just be the voice I gave your character while I was narrating this. Our next story comes from user Bada Bing Throwaway and is entitled, "It's Called Warhammer, Not Lovehammer." Is it just me, or does Lovehammer kind of sound like it might be like an 80s band? Please be advised, this story is tagged not safe for work. About 10 years ago, around the age of 20, I used to play Warhammer 2E with some friends in person. We had done a few campaigns together, and things were generally fine. At one point, we started a new campaign. It wasn't official, so I'm not sure what the campaign itself was about since we never got that far into it. It involved playing as a couple of merchants and their bodyguards, that much I know. Another player approached me with an idea she had, which was essentially to play as married merchants. That seemed fine with me, and we okayed it with the GM. I remember the first few sessions as uneventful. However, soon she started messaging me in private, outside of the table, asking to do some role-playing to get into the headspace of our characters. Nothing wrong with that, so I said sure. Turns out she wanted to do nighttime role-playing. I was a little weirded out, but being 20 and not very assertive, I played along once or twice. I was very uncomfortable the entire time. There were some advances in person as well, including literally telling me she wanted to do it, but I didn't bite. Soon afterwards, I moved away, and as far as I know, the group split up. You want to know the worst part? The GM was her husband, who was the brother of my fairly recent ex-girlfriend, who played at the same table. Turns out they had an open relationship kind of deal, and decided to make a campaign to rope me into that.
So absolutely no shame to those in open relationship. If that's what works for you, that's what works for you, but you gotta stop trying to trick people into joining that. Just be honest. If you're like, hey, I'm in an open relationship, I'm allowed to, have other partners, I find you sexually attractive, let's have some physical fun, make that pitch. While it sounds like you were all friends at this table, OP clearly didn't know that was the arrangement GM and his wife had. So yeah, when the wife of your friend propositions you for sex, of course you're going to be weirded out. Now, I don't want to speak for OP as to whether or not they would have been okay with this if the truth had been told to them at the time, but if I was in OP's shoes, provided that I was physically attracted to the woman in question, if I've just gone through a recent breakup and I get this kind of an offer and I know everything's above board, my down bad self is probably going to take her up on that. But instead, out of nowhere, OP is presented with, let's have an affair because I'm really into you and my husband who is running our game of Warhammer will never know. What OP was presented with was way worse than what the situation actually was, and again, had OP known at the time, they could have made an educated decision to both either hop in the sack with this woman or politely decline, but they weren't given all the information, and it's just creepy and sleazy that both the GM and his wife designed this campaign around getting his wife some nookie. I have used tabletop games to meet new people, to rekindle old friendships, but I have never used it to try and convince someone to sleep with me.
So, I was thinking, in this world, elves don't really like half-elves, generally, and we should write something into your backstory that makes your character okay being around a half-breed like me.
Okay, what do you think?
And I don't think you should. Keep the stuff you do under the sheets off the character sheets, that's what I'm saying. Our next story comes from Filthy Hobo Man and is entitled, Player Rage Quits Over Ubtau's Punishment. A while back, I was running Tomb of Annihilation and had a problem player we'll call Mei in the group. A lot of problems with him, but essentially he had main character syndrome. His character needed to be the most powerful, most beautiful, and most classy. It's hard to stay classy when you're doing a hex crawl through the jungles of Chult. This group had a lot of good in-party banter and would have a lot of fun poking fun at each other and making jokes when they set up camp and whatnot. It was great until they took the piss out of Mei. There was a lot of material to work with since Mei is a high-class elf who spent the entire journey scoffing and talking down to the party. How did Mei respond? He refused to pack up camp and he sat there in the middle of the jungle. When one of the players asked if he wanted to continue, he decided to cast Firebolt repeatedly in an attempt to burn the jungle down. We live in a tropical area, and this led to the funniest argument between two players on the feasibility of setting fire to a jungle. Have you ever tried to light a banana leaf? It's fucking impossible, dude. Mei eventually decides to continue. He tries to lone wolf it, and I tell him he either continues with the party or he's out. He's done this shit before, and it just caused trouble. I was using a third-party add-on from PowerScore that helps plan travel days in the jungle. The next encounter is with a sentient bush that was created by Ubtau. It gives out berries that grant you temp HP if you're nice, or poisons you if you've disrespected the island or the dinosaurs. Most of the party interacted and ate some of the berries and got temp HP. Well, if you try to burn down the jungle, you get the poison condition and the runs. To the party's raucous laughter, Mei stomped out of the session right quick. I never did get to show him the passage from the book, and that I wasn't picking on him. I guess I don't really care either. We finished the campaign without him. It was great.
I mean, sometimes the trash just takes itself out. Enough said. Alright guys, let's do one more before we call it a day. Our final story comes from user Hooded DM and is called Stop Sexually Harassing NPCs. This story is also tagged as not safe for work. I am planning on starting a 2+ year-long campaign, and before we begin, I asked my friend to run a one-shot to give me more time to prepare the content. I figured a one-shot would be a great opportunity for the new players to get acquainted. I had interviewed the players beforehand to make sure they would be a good fit for the game. This one guy, let's call him Hex, seemed great during his interview despite the one big red flag. He had told me he was brand new to D&D and had been banned/ghosted by his last DM, but he claims he didn't know why. I decided to give him a chance. We begin the one-shot and each player describes themselves. I describe myself as an old barbarian dwarf who carries the shell of a turtle and has a walking cane. Someone in the group makes a joke about my character being Master Roshi, and everyone laughs. The game continues. The tavern goes dark due to some sort of spell. Once the darkness clears, we notice a man who has been killed. The widow begins grieving, so I offer her a shell to cry on, tapping my turtle shell. Hex begins screaming, "Get away from her! Stop sexually harassing her! That's all you've been doing since you got here!" This player continues to try to exclude my PC during every single interaction and steps in between me and any female character I try to interact with to solve the mystery. Is the newbie playing the class White Knight? Long story short, my character goes off on his own due to being blocked at every turn by this White Knight. At one point, he even attacked my character simply for trying to ask an NPC a question. During the course of the game, he repeatedly swore at NPCs and even told a player to fuck off and called him a fucking asshole and threatened to one-shot him for simply walking through a door unannounced. I ended up solving the mystery by finding the black powder in the mouth of a deer head on the wall and confronting the bard that had a room next to it. At the end of the game, I explained to Hex that my character had come across a dead male turtle in the forest surrounded by 2 little baby turtle. The babies didn't want to leave without their father, and the only way to feed and take care of them was to wear his shell. I explained that I had vowed to find their father's killer, which ended up being the bard, and that was my character's final quest before passing away. The 2 baby turtles were in my shell the entire time. I roleplayed it that way too. I explained to him that the reason I was looking at women in the tavern was because I was looking for their mother. I asked several NPC for a female turtle. The reason why I followed the waitress was to get a drink from being parched from weeks of traveling mountains to get here, and the reason why I tried to console the widow who had just lost her husband was because I could relate to the baby turtles in my shell losing their fathers the same way. He ended up apologizing and feeling bad for what he did to me and my PC. I ended up removing him from the group and explained to him the reasons why. I also told him it was because he was vaping in-game and coughing non-stop. He had promised me he wouldn't smoke during games during the interview. He then began spamming everyone in the group, begging them to let him back into the group, acting as if he had no idea why he was removed. The resulting drama he caused ended up causing one of my best players to drop out of the campaign. In hindsight, I never should have allowed him in my game when he told me his last DM banned him.
OP, I love your one-shot character concept. It sounds like it would have been something really fun to play, especially if you're planning on DMing for a 2+ year campaign. Have some fun with the last character you're going to get to potentially play for a while. But my main question about this problem player is, who was he virtue signaling for? I've heard so many stories about a problem player coming to defend milady's honor when that is a female player's NPC, but he's trying to virtue signal and call you a dirty old man for just talking to NPCs? And he did this right after meeting all of you. What's more is that after this one-shot is over, you were going to be his DM for the next 2 years. You interviewed him. He knew this was going to be the situation, and he still chose to be a virtue-signaling asshole to you. What is this guy's deal? No wonder his last group kicked him. And good job on kicking him. Sorry you lost a good player, but hey, live and learn. And that's going to be our video for today, guys. Again, sorry about any audio imperfections going on. I am not having the best of days, but hopefully this video brings a bit of a smile to whatever kind of day you're having. As always, guys, this is Chimera Miniatures. I'm Mr. Sean, and I hope you alpha great day and an even beta tomorrow. Bye-bye!